All right, so what's up, everybody? Thanks for clicking this video. Thanks for tuning into my channel. My name is Simon Hill, Black American from Louisiana, coming to you live from Budapest, Hungary, and I'm here with my beautiful wife. Say hi, boo.
Hi everyone, I'm AKDI and I'm from Turkey, and today we are reviewing La Chimera.
La Chimera, yes, the 2023 period comedy drama film written and directed by Alice Rohrwacher. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Even though her last name sounds very German, she's an Italian film director, editor, screenwriter, and she's made quite a few films and making a name for herself in the industry. And this film is highly awarded and highly regarded as one of the best films to come out of Europe in 2023. So we just finished watching it about 20, 30 minutes ago, something like that. And how did you feel about it, acting?
I felt like I was watching like a Italian folklore story because I think just the vibes of the movie was giving like that vintage feeling, but also there were like some not supernatural maybe, but just unbelievable things that were happening within the movie as well. So yeah, that was just like the vibe that I got. But I like it, and I feel like there's gonna be lots to discover in this movie as we talk about it as well.
Yeah, I feel like knowing that it was a comedy, I wanted to go into it laughing more than I did. It's more towards a surreal drama than it is a comedy, though there are parts in it that are funny. I can say that I liked the second half more, but at the very beginning, I was very confused. I wasn't drawn into the story. I wasn't, very attracted to the main protagonist, who is Arthur, the wizard archaeologist who has the power to find, ancient graves with the use of a stick. I wasn't, brought into it, but when it all sort of like wrapped up towards the end, I was like, okay, that was actually pretty good. But yeah, it's very surreal. It's very surreal and very dramatic.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know that this movie was a comedy, and right off the bat, it was like giving me like a family drama a little bit because of like the character looked a bit sad, right? So I was thinking, okay, is this going to be a drama? But then they sort of had some playful music there as well. So I was like, okay, so this is like one of those happy drama movies.
Yeah,
So maybe like calling it a comedy was misleading for you because yeah, I didn't know it was a comedy, so I
right.
didn't go in with any expectations of laughing really.
Right. But as you did watch it, did you laugh during parts of it?
Yeah, a couple of parts, but it wasn't like laughing out loud. It was more like a smirk. And also it was because some of the parts are just weird. Like
Yeah,
you just say like Italians are weird dudes.
yeah, I mean, you can laugh at some of the stuff culturally Italians do that we might find strange, like, a girl singing and then plucking a string between her teeth as an instrument, or like just generally Italians and their abrasiveness and aggressiveness. But there are also parts in there that are just straight up silly, like, when the thieves are facing the capitalists at the end and they start barking at each other like dogs. Like, come on, that's funny, right? It's silly, it's surreal, but it's funny too at the same time.
Yeah, it's like yeah, it's funny, but it's not like I don't know, like I'm gonna be laughing for 5 minutes funny, you know?
Yeah, it's a
More
different
like
type of
a
humor.
down to earth laugh.
Yeah, the humor in this is very subtle. It's almost humorless humor, very dry humor, bone dry humor, pun intended, when we think about them robbing graves. So, yeah, it was interesting. Thinking about the title is called The Impossible Dream when you translate La Chimera into Italian. So do you think, the title, says something about, Arthur and his journey of, trying to live out his passion for archaeology, but also having to be sucked into the world of capitalism where he has to make money from his passion?
Yeah, I think the title could be standing for two things. because Arthur, yeah, he's interested in archaeology, but he cannot fulfill what he wants to do with archaeology in the way he probably wants it. Because to me, it felt like he just wanted to appreciate it and maybe like learn more about it or study it or something like that, but that wasn't his reality, right? And then there's also his flashbacks of the woman that he loved, and he can never have her back as well. So I think it stands for like those two things.
Right, right. I think the impossible dream could also be like our dream of the afterlife, because all these people in the past, they buried their loved ones with all these gifts and trinkets around them, and hoping that they will be useful for them in the afterlife. Which, if you think reasonably about it, it's impossible, right? You have to have faith that there's an afterlife, and it is a dream that there's a heaven or a hell for some, right? But it's also an impossible dream to think that, you know, people won't try to find a way to make money out of anything. And like how capitalism forces us to try to commodify even the dead. How can we make money off of people who are no longer with us, right? And I think there's like multiple layers to the impossible dream. But on the surface level, I think the dream is Arthur's inability to sort of use his talents in a way that respects the dead, but also feeds himself.
Yeah, I don't know if he wants to feed himself. Because, like, of course he needs, you know, some things to live, right? Like food and stuff like that. But it didn't feel like he was, you know, doing anything really for survival or money, because he was eating whenever people offered him a plate and drinking whenever people bought him a drink. Like, we never really see him cooking or buying anything. So yeah, I think like for him, like the impossible dream was more sentimental and emotional rather than realistic.
Right. Well, there's also the dream of Benjamina, right? Like he has this dream where that's reoccurring throughout the film of him trying to reunite with his, you know, now dead ex-girlfriend or wife, whoever it was. I'm not exactly sure. But, yeah, he's also disconnected from that hope and that possibility of having some sort of something to live for in this world. Cause now how Arthur's living, he's only chasing after the remnants of the past, of other people's past, and not having something for himself.
Yeah, which I think like, you know, movie deals with a lot of death actually. Like considering it's a comedy, you know, the settings are always the cemeteries, the tombs of, you know, dead people from the past, from ancient times. But then we also dig into a dead person, possibly, or lost. We don't know really that well, of, you know, Benjamina. And, yeah, like, it's kind of weird how, you know, both people are possibly dead, but their depiction is different. Cause one of them is like older and one of them is more, recent. And they still, both of them have like a occupation in, what's his name? Arthur's, you know, memory in life.
Yeah, and it's interesting you brought up like recent in the past, because that's what I was thinking about throughout this movie. Like this movie takes place in the 80s. So it's kind of distant for us now. That's almost 40 years ago, right? And in the film, the people are living in an Italy that looks like on screen, kind of dilapidated. Parts of it are falling apart. There's like abandoned houses and railroad stations and stuff like that. And so they're not, you know, they're living with some sort of past near them, right? But then the past that they value the most is the most ancient one, right? And it makes me think about like how nowadays, like some people reminisce on the 80s or they nostalgize the 80s, right? And that's because they're so far away, but they don't do the same for the early 2000s or even the last decade and all the styles and trends. It's kind of interesting how things go up in value the further they are in time for us. But it's also the converse, because something also means something to us more the more recent it is, especially pain. Cause like Benjamina probably died very recently in Arthur's life, and that seems to haunt him. And it's like for any person here, you're not going to care about your great great grandfather who died 100 years ago, but you're going to care if your mom died last year. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I guess like what you said, the value of ancient things like go up as they are older, right? But that value is sort of like set by the system. And because, yeah, there are people who buy those artifacts, or there are museums who, sort of study those artifacts and let us know that they are in fact important or old. But then when you look at the new dead, or the new old, the new history, like you said, 80s and things, they are more like alive in our heads and in our memories, and not within the system.
I
Does
kind
that make
of,
sense?
I hear what you're saying. I just kind of disagree with you. I think people naturally value things that are old. And I think that goes back to like our evolution and our brain, because we value things that are stable, things that are able to survive the time, because we see so many things around us slowly fade away and wither. That's why when we look at a giant mountain, we're in awe. Or when we go to like a very old building, or the Great Pyramids of Giza, we're in awe naturally. But capitalism around us tries to commodify those experiences. So you have to pay to see the pyramids of Giza. You have to pay to see Mount Everest. But it's naturally within us to value the old and the ancient. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that. But the thing is, like, I don't know, if you were to accidentally find, I don't know, a cup, and supposedly it was like 1,000 years old, you might probably not know that it's old or valuable even. And what tells us that those things are valuable is the system, because the system studies them and then
Right.
uses it,
Right.
either to like charge people or fascinate people, or so create some sort of like, admiration. Of course, it's admirable the way it is, but I just feel like the system sort of like pushes it forward. And even if the people who might not value those things sort of are forced to value.
Right, that's true. Like I'm thinking about stories of like somebody going to an antique shop and selling grandpa's old baseball cards for $5. And then the antique shop sells them for $1,000 because they find out, oh wait, people really, really want this old Jackie Robinson card or something like that. And the Banksys as well. Like Banksy famously went to New York and sold his own paintings, and people barely bought them. One person bought it for like $15 and then resold it for like 15,000. So yeah, the market does decide it, but I just think our value for the ancient things does come natural to us.
Yeah, I guess you could say like it's like a curiosity, right?
Hmm.
Because when you think of ancient things, you're like, oh, how did those people used to live? At least for
Hmm.
me, like it's like that,
Hmm.
because it just makes me curious about what they believed, how they lived their life.
Hmm.
And, most of the time when I was watching this movie, it also reminded me of like this news that I heard in Turkey.
Hmm.
And basically, there was like a town that had a lot of ancient artifacts,
Hmm.
but the residents of that town didn't know what the hell they were. So they would just be using them building their houses. So it's like you have a house, like a small village house, and there's like an ancient statue's head within the wall,
Wow.
because that person used it and they didn't know it, and they're just like using, I don't know, thousands of years old artifacts in their houses. It's sitting in their gardens and
Right.
things like that.
Yeah, and that makes me think about, in the film there's a scene where, Arthur, Benjamina's mother, and Italia, the maid that works for Benjamina's mother, they go to this abandoned railway station. And while they're there, they're like, yeah, the government just sort of abandoned it. It belongs to the public, but nobody values it. And then later on in the film, we see, Italia's living at that station and stuff like that. And it makes me think about, okay, like what is the proper way to deal with our past, or deal with artifacts of our past? Should we reincorporate them? Should we try to use them again? Or should they be kept up for safe value. Because on one hand, like the story you told about those Turkish people, yeah, it's cool that you could walk into some Turkish grandma's house and see a statue there. But what if that statue gets broken? What if eventually they throw it away and toss it out? And that's lost culture. That's lost history of humanity and art. What do you think?
I mean, it's a big dilemma because if you think about it, those artifacts that are just very ancient and old, they belong to everybody. At the same time, they belong to no one, right? It's not really right to say, oh, founders keepers, because, nobody inherited them.
Well, I feel like to say it belongs to no one is a bit disrespectful for the dead. Cause like there's a scene in this film where Arthur is like, on the train and then people come up to him saying, hey, have you seen this ancient, material that I kept in my father's grave? It looked like this, it looked like that. And more people come up to him and say this. I feel like even though, yes, the people that lived thousands of years ago and they're buried in some ancient tomb, they're not here. Their families aren't here. Who knows where their descendants are, if they have any. But to say like, oh, it belongs to no one, I feel like that's kind of disrespectful to the people. I don't know. What do you think?
I said that because they said the same thing about the station. And I don't think it's disrespectful because not everybody has to belong to anyone or someone. There could be, like, there are things in the world that belong to nobody. And those things could be one of them because, yeah, like, they belong to someone in the past, but if you look at today, they don't really belong to anyone.
I mean, just think about this, AKDI. God forbid, 200 years from now, I'm gone, you're gone, your mother's gone, brother's gone, everybody that you know and love now is gone. And then somebody comes and just pisses on my grave, your grave, and everybody you love's grave. Like literally takes a piss or shit on it. Like you wouldn't say, oh no, that's not disrespectful because the grave belongs to nobody.
Okay, I'm not talking about just like, destroying those things. I'm just saying, I was talking about like who owns those things. That was the idea I was going for. And even if that, like what you said happens, if somebody pisses on my grave thousands of years later, I'm gonna be dead. Like, bro, I'm not gonna care about it. Nobody's gonna care about it that I know, cause they all be dead as well. So, yeah, maybe if you think about it now, it's disrespectful, but really it's not gonna matter.
Okay, but if I think if nobody cares about something and if something is sacred are two separate things. Like, for example, in Turkey, like most people aren't Christian, but in Turkey you have hundreds of ancient Christian churches. So technically Turkish people don't care about the church, but the church is still sacred for the history it holds and the meaning that it has for surviving all of those years. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. And I hope that someone cares about my grave. But I'm just saying, if they don't, then like I'm in the past, so it won't really matter to me at least. But yeah, what I was going to say about that, I was sort of like talking about the ownership of it, and I think in this movie, that is a big question, like who owns these ancient things? And it's the same way with what you said, maybe, I don't know, like Turkey has, lots of Christian artifacts or churches that are sacred right now, but I don't know, who should they belong to? Should they belong to the Turkish people, to the Christians, to nobody, to everybody? And if they do belong to everybody and everybody deserves to have a piece of history, because it's a collective thing, right? Then is it right to, hold it and, let people pay for it to see it and all sorts of things. And I thought the movie was sort of, asking those questions as well.
I think, once again, whether somebody owns something and whether something is sacred are two separate things, right? Like, I think, for example, of a cemetery, right? Technically, most cemeteries around the world belong to the government, whether it be the city, the state, the region, country, whatever, right? But I would still argue a cemetery is sacred because we all know that most people around the world value and honor their dead, right? Like you have elaborate ceremonies to bury your dead. And this crosses cultures, right? Even if you're not a Jewish person, you would still walk into a Jewish cemetery, hopefully, and be respectful for how they bury their dead and honor their dead. And the same thing for different categories and religions and stuff like that. If you're walking to a place that might be hella ancient and everybody who's around this is dead and gone and separated, I still think there is such a thing as a sacred place, right?
Yeah, there is sacredness within these objects, of course, but who gets to decide that?
I think it comes from like a certain morality and a certain level of ethics to have. Like I said, like the example about the gravesite, right? Like you know when you're walking into a place where other people are dead, whether this is 100 years ago or 1 year ago, you should be a bit more respectful there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
But I don't know. I think we'll agree to disagree, maybe. I don't know. Because I feel like
Uh,
you're saying because nobody owns it, it doesn't matter if people are disrespectful in it.
no, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying it doesn't matter for me as a person if
Mm-hmm.
somebody's gonna piss on my grave 100 years later.
Right.
Of course, I would want people to be respectful to it, but it's not gonna matter to me
Mm-hmm. Right.
because I'll
But
be gone.
okay. Okay. But when we think about right now, you're living right now, and if you were to enter a place that was sacred or a place that had sentimental value to somebody in the present or in the past, would you be respectful to it? Or would
Yeah,
you,
of course.
well, not would you be respectful, would you feel obligated to be respectful towards it?
Yeah, I would feel obligated not to harm it.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. Like, I wouldn't feel obligated to feel any type of way towards it.
Mm-hmm.
But most of the time, like from what I experience, I feel awe and I wonder what that person, how that person was. So I
Mm-hmm.
feel curiosity,
Mm-hmm.
but I never feel like, disrupting it or harming it.
Right, right, right. But going back to the film, going back to how this movie opens up, it opens up with this guy named Arthur. He's sleeping on a train. We find out he just got out of prison because he gets off of the train and one of his homies is like, hey, Spartaco, our boss, paid to get you out early. Come back and hang with us. Arthur doesn't really want to go and hang out with the gang anymore. So he goes back to his little shack on the side of a hill and he sort of lives in poverty. And then he goes to meet up with, the older woman who's in a wheelchair. She's a singing teacher and she is the mother of Benyamina, who is Arthur's ex-girlfriend that we see at the beginning of the film. And in, this woman's house, she teaches, other young women in the city how to sing, but she has one girl that's living there with her who's doing maid service while getting lessons, and her name is Italia. What did you think about like the first, 15 minutes of the film where they're introducing the characters and the scenery?
I was intrigued by the main character, Arthur,
Mm-hmm.
because he felt disconnected and he felt like he was holding some things in.
Mm-hmm.
He had some sort of trouble within him. And obviously, like the people that were trying to talk to him were his friends, but I felt like he was mad at them
Mm-hmm.
for some reason. I didn't know what. And right off the bat, he felt like someone who doesn't really care about material things.
Yeah.
And I was also interested in Flora, the mother of Benyamina, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The singing teacher, because she was interesting because she was sort of like acting bad or passive aggressive towards Italia, the
Mm-hmm.
maid slash student,
Yeah.
right? But then she was so loving towards Arthur.
Mm-hmm.
So I couldn't understand like why she was that affectionate with Arthur in the beginning,
Yeah,
really.
well, because Arthur could have been, her new son-in-law. He was going to marry her daughter, and maybe that's why. Uh,
Yeah, but sorry, but Arthur also looked like, he was very poor
Hmm.
and, nobody knew what he was doing and he didn't have a job and stuff like that. So I was wondering, like, what does this mother-in-law see in Arthur, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah. When I first got introduced to Arthur, I was very confused later on because they said that he was a foreigner. They kept on referring to him as the Englishman, and he also speaks English every now and then, especially with Flora, right? And the thing is, on the train, he acts very Italian. Like he's wearing like, low key, cut, what's it called? Like a suit jacket with beige color egg whites. You get what I'm saying? Like he looked very Italian and acted very Italian when he got aggressive with the train ticket guy. And his Italian to my ears sounded okay. I don't know if Italians watch this and they're like, ooh, horrible accent. Oh, yeah, I was kind of confused because he nailed the mannerisms. The guy who plays Arthur, his name is Josh O'Connor, and he's actually an English actor. But yeah, he nailed the Italian mannerisms for me. What did you think?
Yeah, he definitely assimilated into the Italian culture and Italian
Hmm.
man vibes.
Yeah,
And I didn't really, like, throughout the movie, I didn't think of him as an Englishman until they say he's an Englishman.
yeah,
And, like, every time I had to be reminded when they said Englishman that, oh, like, he's not Italian.
yeah, yeah. Now, another thing that I just have to get out the way, I didn't hear any of the other reviewers on YouTube talking about this, but Italia's story is a bit interesting. Now, it's interesting because she has a biracial baby, and this baby she's sort of like hiding in the house, even from Flora, who she's sort of living with. And I find this kind of strange, first and foremost, like where Italia came from. I don't feel like they gave a lot of background on who she was. And I feel like still, even with Arthur as well, there's not a lot of background. We just sort of have to fill in the pieces on who this character was. And I feel like this for a lot of the characters. But Italia, because of her name, her name is literally Italy. I feel like she's supposed to represent more in this film. But there's still so much mystery about her. Any comments about that?
I mean, he's a character that her grave is not dug in the movie, I guess, because every time they dig tombs and graves, they find a lot of artifacts, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we don't really have that with Italia. She's not dead, not to be confused, but we don't have those details about her past.
Mm-hmm.
But she is like, I like her character because she's like this quirky, sort of silly girl.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone tells her that, Flora, the lady that she's taking care of,
Mm-hmm.
plus her teacher, she is using her, but it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't feel like she minds it.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously there is a reason for it because, she's hiding her children there. But it's interesting, because I was maybe imagining, oh, maybe she's running away from a guy.
Mm-hmm.
Or, I don't know, maybe her husband died, something. Or maybe she ran away from another town because they called her like a sinner or something.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, that's my theory that, she was basically maybe a loose girl in the past or maybe just too free, sort of like in that movie Melina, right? Like she tried to live above what a woman is supposed to be and then she ended up running away and ending up in Flora's house, something like that. But she's also very untalented. And I'm like, why would you name the main character Italia when she can't sing? It doesn't look like she can cook. She can barely dance and she has like this goofy awkwardness about her. It's like if you made the main character of a film America, and America is like super buff, very smart, and very cultured, and knows other people's histories and stuff like that. Like that's not America. Like you can't name a main character that. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, but she has this like sincereness to her.
Mm.
Her mannerism is like she wants to do the right thing by
Mm-hmm.
everyone and she just wants to live like a good life.
Yeah.
That's fair. And
Mm-hmm.
she's very sincere about like how she's feeling and what
Yeah.
she's thinking. She's honest.
I got you.
So maybe, every country has the pros and the cons, right?
Yeah.
So maybe she does represent the pros and cons of Italy.
Maybe. I don't know. I find this a bit strange. But she is a good contrast to Arthur's sort of seriousness and the sort of like, I hate to say this, stereotypical, misunderstood savant genius that Arthur is supposed to be in this film. Like he's supposed to be, Einstein, but the world doesn't get him. And, Italia, on the other hand, is supposed to be this, down to earth, sincere girl, like you said, that, the world just really, kind of rallies around and supports to some degree. Does that make sense?
I guess. But I
Yeah.
think like I don't know, maybe the one of the biggest things about Arthur is that like I felt like everyone believed he was special.
Yeah.
But he really didn't believe that he was special or he could do more than he thought.
I disagree. I think everybody knew he was special and the talent he had, but they were using him, right?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, on the other hand, Italia sort of got the love and affection from, Flora just because of her just genuineness, her earnestness, her frankness. You know what I mean?
But talking about Arthur, I felt like he wasn't really concerned with being a genius
Hmm.
or like this poetic, mastermind that was misunderstood. I don't think he thought that about himself. Does that make
Um,
sense?
I well, yeah, because he's not a genius, he's not a mastermind, he's a wizard, and that's one of my biggest issues with this film is that Arthur is technically not smart. He doesn't seem like he studied archaeology for 14 years in university, but chose a different career path. He literally has magic powers. And I feel like the film sort of loses points because it would have been more interesting had Arthur been something else, like a genius professor or a student of archaeology who wanted to bring it back to the people instead of being in the ivory tower. But literally he takes a stick and walks in the forest until he faints, and then they dig and they find treasure. Like, come on now.
I kind of liked it. Honestly, because I think if he was like this Sherlock detective genius type of guy, that like he somehow studied archaeology and was able to find all these artifacts, I feel like that would have been something else and not this movie. That
Hmm.
would have been completely something else.
Yeah.
So I think it was more like, they never really say he's a witch,
Hmm.
but it's more like he can sense things
Hmm.
that are just really ancient.
Hmm.
So to me, it felt like he had a deeper connection with like these sorts of ancient things
I got you.
underground, like ancient times.
Okay.
And it was like a bit sentimental, when he was going through that. And it didn't really take me out of it.
It took me out of it because I feel like this film has a lot of realism around it. Like, if besides Arthur's magicness, everything else in here makes sense. Like the underground economy, black market of treasured goods being sold to rich people, right? Poor Italians having to make any way possible to make a buck, right? People living in dilapidated homes, and the scenery in general feels real, except for this one thing that sticks out like a sore thumb, and that's why to me it takes me out of it.
I mean, that's why I feel like this was like a folk tale,
Mhm.
like a talk of the town story that sort of became like a mystery, myth at
Mhm.
the end. Oh, there was this some guy and he could sense all the treasures and, ancient things.
Yeah.
And in reality, like, that was like capitalism and struggle
Yeah.
with love and life was what was really going on with this guy.
Right.
But like the town kept talking about how he could find treasures.
Yeah.
I feel like it's just like a mixture of those things, and that's why it's very realistic at the same time, but there's that
Mhm.
element of not superficial, supernatural,
Yeah.
to it.
Yeah. I would appreciate the supernatural had it been tied in with more supernaturalness. If like going into it, there was from the rip, from the jump. Okay, this is going to be a mystical, magical journey. But If you told me that, oh, hey, this is sort of like a documentary or like a remake of this guy's life who really existed, I would have believed you other than the magic part for me. So that's the thing that takes me out of it. But how did we even get to here? It's because after, what's his name? Arthur goes to see his ex-girlfriend's mother, right? He goes back home, and then Italia sort of like comes to see him, and she sees all the trinkets and stuff in his house, and Arthur is also sick, so she came to bring him medicine. But then she walks outside and she knocks over a tree, and Arthur sees that what he was keeping under the tree isn't there. So he goes to the gang, and he's like, hey guys, give me back the stuff that y'all took from me, all the artifacts, and they unravel it. And this is sort of like where we find out, the real deal about what Arthur does at this point of the film. After that, Arthur says, I still don't want to be a part of this, but they sort of like hunt him down, dressed up for like a Halloween event. His friends all ride on a tractor, and then eventually they convince him to come to this, big Halloween-ish type ceremony in Italy. And that was a really cool scene. Any comments about those scenes?
Yeah, I think it was really smart of the director to have that irony when all of his friends were dressed as witches, but the only sort of supernatural person was Arthur, and he was not dressed up as a witch, right?
Nice.
So I like that contrast there. And once again, it feels like there's a contrast of like ancient, or like not a contrast, but hint towards like ancient times, because this festival, I was thinking this as I was watching it. A lot of cultures have, witch festivals. And it's most of the time based on like ancient tales. Right? There were witches and people used to burn them, and now like we celebrate them or remember them or something like that. So yeah, I was once again thinking about, sort of how this ties into the story as a whole, once again taking something from the dead, but it's culture and it's okay.
Right. Yeah, it felt very cultural. Like what I like about this film is like it does show a lot of Italy's culture, and it seems like, there is that sort of juxtaposition, that contrast between the culture that they sort of value today, but they don't value it as much as their very, very deep ancient past. And I think this is a good point to bring up Melody. Melody comes, and she's this girl who's representative of Spartaco, who is the, underground market boss for these illicit goods that they find. And she's trying to convince them to, get back in the game. And, Spartaco wants to, get her money and do business with Arthur and the gang again. And there was this interesting point where Melody looks at the camera and breaks the third wall and says, my mother always told me that if the Etruscans stayed in Italy, we wouldn't have this much patriarchy or machismo or something like that. And I think this is a good point to bring up. Specifically, the artifacts that they're finding come from the Etruscans. And the Etruscans were the ancient people that were there before the Romans. And still to this day, people don't know what language, the Etruscans spoke. They didn't leave behind any writings, but they did leave behind sort of their presence through all the artifacts that they have found in Italy and stuff like that. And I find that very fascinating because I think, there is this deep connection maybe that Italians have in their culture to their Roman Empire, Republic heritage, Julius Caesar and all of that. But the Etruscans are seen as a more like natural, humanist, down to earth way of living compared to the Romans who left such a big lasting imperial legacy, stuff like that. I don't know. Do you think there was any significance for this film focusing on finding Etruscan art rather than Roman art?
Maybe it was to sort of amp up the mystery of it. Because I didn't know about that, about like can you say that again?
Etruscans.
Etruscans. Okay. So I did not know about them, right? Which makes it a bit more fascinating. And it's also maybe like the conversation we had earlier in the podcast, like what if, yeah, we might not know, who those people were, but should we have to still praise that or respect that or take care of that, those things? Because we don't know what they really contributed when it comes to the culture, and them also like being woman-led society, for
Yeah.
example. It's not present right now, and it doesn't represent Italian culture right now.
Right.
But do they still deserve, you know, the value that they're put?
Yeah, yeah. I think the irony of all of that is that people sort of look to the past as, oh, that was our glorious past. If you're a feminist, you're like, oh, the Etruscans were great. They had female queens and they had a matrilineal society. And then if you're some patriarchal, chauvinist, you might say, oh, the Romans were great. That's when men were strong and stuff like that. So people look to the past for different things. But I think what people forget is that in Italia, you can sort of make today whatever you want it to be. Fast forwarding to later in the film, like when Italia takes the old railroad house and turns it into like this communitarian, egalitarian, female run shelter, right? Like you can take your society and meld it to whatever you want to be. You get what I'm saying? But people look to the past as, oh, that was what we should go back to. That's what we need to keep. You get what I mean?
Yeah, that's a very interesting.
Hold on, wait, AKDI, you're on mute.
Oh,
You
sorry,
gotta
sorry.
stop. You gotta stop muting. You don't need to mute all the time.
Okay, okay.
But you have to start over.
No, it's fine. I was saying that you said like a great point, because you said that people might want to go back to the way things were instead of adapting that to today. Or also some people might think the history, the past, is like not modern enough, it's ridiculous, it's unequal, unfair, and things like that. But either perspective, actually, you can take the past and adapt it, like you said. And the only person who was able to do that in the movie was Italia.
Yeah, yeah. But moving on, at that point, the gang all comes around Arthur, and they're reconnected. They meet up with some old villager who's like, "I got a backyard full of ancient stuff, but my stupid ancestors sort of like picked it up and threw it away. So you guys come in here, find it, and then we'll split the money and stuff like that." What did you think of like Arthur's gang, like when they finally came back together? Like, what did you think of the bros?
I liked them. Like at first, I was rooting for them because they were fun, and they sort of like, I know like they weren't that young, but they gave me that young, like, nonchalant vibe. Just like doing whatever, getting drunk, stealing stuff, and being young. But they were actually like adults. I think every one of them was like older than 30, somewhere in their 30s. So that was like a different perspective that the director put, I guess, when it comes to the gang. But I definitely like wouldn't want to be one of them, but I would like think they were cool if they were living in my town,
Yeah.
which is kind of bad because they're doing something bad.
Yeah, yeah. They are the protagonists, so it's like you are watching it and rooting for them. But I kind of disagree. I wasn't like hoping like, yeah, I hope they find more graves and rob the stuff. But it's like I understand because like these are grown ass men, but they also are probably very poor. They probably don't have a lot of opportunities in life. So this is what they've had to resort to, literally digging up the graves of ancient people to try to sell whatever they could find, which is not a good life to live. I can't say I was like rooting for them because I felt very conflicted about their actual job in and of itself, you know? And I think this film even opens up the possibility to like critique museums. Like, okay, we're saying these guys might be wrong for robbing these graves and doing it in this illegal black market that funnels up to rich people. But isn't that the same thing that happens in a museum? You know, the traditional archaeologists go to Iraq, find an old vase, and then it goes to the Smithsonian in New York or London and stays there only for the world's richest to see. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think definitely there's a big critique of like that capitalist archaeological history art, richness, because that is something like it's weird that this main character Arthur was British, and
Mm-hmm.
Britain is infamous for stealing everyone's artifacts,
Get 'em, acting.
basically,
Get 'em.
all around the world. So
Mm-hmm.
I think, also we see Arthur being overly Italian or acting like very much Italian, right? Nothing like a British person,
Mm-hmm.
except the times where he speaks, British. So I think
Speaks British.
he's
I
also
love that.
refusing that, capitalist idea of owning artifacts and showcasing them for money as well.
Actually, I was trying to go through a whole review without bringing up white supremacy, but you had to bring it out of me. Honestly, you could watch this film through the lens of critiquing white supremacy and say, you know what, Arthur is actually a really, really bad villain because he doesn't even want money. He really just wants to steal. He is the purest of the British there ever was. He's worse than V in V for Vendetta. V was collecting a whole bunch of artifacts and keeping them underground. Arthur wants to go underground and dig them all up and throw them in the water. Like, he's actually kind of the worst type of imperialist, colonialist, culture theft, culture thief. You really could look at it that way. I was trying to go, Acty, but you got me started.
I mean, the antagonist is the capitalists, and naturally, most of the capitalists in the world are white supremacists or white people in general. So that's like, it comes with that.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I don't think Arthur enjoyed stealing. I think Arthur just found enjoyment in finding these pieces.
Right. Right. Even if
And
he didn't enjoy it, he knew he was using his powers though to sort of basically recycle the same system that keeps these artifacts in the hands of people that
yeah,
keep it out of reach for most of us.
yeah, definitely.
Very, very interesting take. Nobody else is going to have this take on YouTube, but that's because we're the most unique movie reviewers. You know what I mean? I'm Mexican. You're Jewish. We're always going to attack things different ways.
Shalom.
But yeah, the scene, basically Arthur, well, we first see Arthur's magic powers come alive. He grabs a stick, walks in the forest, and, basically passes out right there. And also the screen sort of like inverts, while we're looking at him, sort of like symbolic of like one of those tarot cards called the Hanged Man. And I believe the Hanged Man is a person who's sort of like torn in between life and death, stuff like that. And yeah, when Arthur passes out, the gang sort of scares away the old man whose land they're on, and then they come back later that night and dig in the tunnel, but the tunnel was already broken into before, and they don't find much in there. People even took the bones of the dead person, but they do find a few pots and pans and stuff like that, and they take it away. The old man is very pissed the next day, and he like curses them, but they're like, "Hey, get out of here, old man." And then that's when we get like the first song, I think, that narrates the story, right? And this happens about 30 or 40 minutes into the film. There's like this Italian guitarist with this other guy who plays the triangle, and he sort of narrates and also critiques the main characters and the plots in general. What did you think about any of those scenes?
First of all, the whole like actual tomb digging part, I thought it was scary as hell. Like
Mm-hmm.
going down into the tombs, I feel like, it gave me that sense of, how, people who are unfortunate, who are poor, they can do things to risk their lives in order to have money or in order to keep themselves fed and things like that, like miners or construction builders. You know, these are very dangerous jobs, and it reminded me of those jobs. But of course, it's illegal to, you know, go into the tombs. And also, they were also, you know, sort of taken away from the poor as well. Because that guy who, you know, actually found or owned the land that they found the tomb in wanted a pay from it, right?
Yeah.
And they sort of fooled him as well. So I felt like that was cool. But it was definitely interesting how they discovered it, you know. It was definitely like exhilarating to
Yeah,
watch.
it's very Indiana Jones mixed with a Boys in the Hood feel. You get what I'm
Yeah.
saying? It's like if you and your homies is like, hey man, let's try to dig up some stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, it was kind of interesting to see them jump into the cavern. One thing that I didn't like about the film though is that I felt like every time they jumped into the cavern to go underground, it was the same one. And I'm not talking about like as in like the movie directors, the producers just use the same scene to do each of the scenes when they go underground into one of the tombs. Because I felt like when they jumped into the first one, it was the same for the second one. They just like added some water and some paint on the wall. That's just my critique of the film in general. But no, it was cool jumping in there, and I really liked the song that the guy was singing because it reminded me of like watching a play or something like that. And that's like the intermission, and like the musician comes there and he sort of like recounts what you saw, explained it all, and also sort of makes you question what you're watching as well. Because he's like critiquing them, like these robbers are doing it for thrill, or they're also doing it because they have to get paid. Some are doing it for the money, some just for the lust, stuff like that. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I definitely loved the whole music in it as well. I think
Hmm.
overall the music in the movie was very good, but I
Yeah.
like those like narrating songs and
Hmm.
you know how this group, this gang became Tombaroli, right? The
The seven.
fascinating gang.
Yeah.
And once again, it gave me that feeling of a folk tale. Like they
Hmm.
were the talk of the town. Everybody's talking about this gang who's making, I don't know, a lot of money and digging tombs and then running from the police.
Yeah.
And they're dangerous and I don't know, you know, that type of feeling. And I liked how, you know, he was saying, oh, the head of the gang is actually Arthur, but he's troubled. And, you know, he was sort of giving us a bit more into his character as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. 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 It was, I'm American, so you know I love a good montage in a film. Like when the characters are doing their antics and their deeds and they're on the come up. And while he's singing the song, there is like a montage, but it's so skillfully done. I didn't even realize it was a montage until it was like over. And it shows them doing all the things AKDI just said, running from the police, like digging holes, hiding in hills and trenches and stuff like that, waiting for construction workers to leave so they can plunder the riches. Like, I love that montage scene. That was one of my favorite scenes in the film, low key. Very fun.
Yeah, I definitely didn't feel the montage either. Because
Yeah.
it was mixed with the music that was actually playing, like the guy playing the instrument and stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you said, it was skillfully done because right after that, it also
Mhm.
sort of fades into the present, and we
Mhm.
see them celebrating their gains.
Right. 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 Now, there's this part that I really didn't understand, once again, because I think, Arthur's Italian is good, but Italia says, I'm going to give you a crash course in Italian. And she teaches him words, but they're also like sign language. Uh, like I'll kill you, or come here and stuff like that, or be quiet, silent, whatever, right? What was the point of that? Did you catch that? Was it so that they could talk without Flora knowing what they're talking about? I don't know. What do you think?
Maybe because, yeah, like if you think about it, Flora thinks Benjamina is, you know, gonna come back.
Hmm.
And she's married to Arthur, or Arthur's long, you know, girlfriend. I think they
Hmm.
were married. or they wanted to
No,
get
no.
married.
Flora said that's her boyfriend, Arthur.
Okay, okay. So they were together for a long time, and
Yeah.
obviously Flora wanted them to be together.
Mhm.
So it would be weird if they were sort of like flirting in front of her,
Mhm.
and she knew that Arthur's Italian was like okay,
Mhm.
but I think there was also a bit of nationalism in Italia as well, not in a bad way.
Yeah.
But I think she was sort of like, okay, so if you're gonna act like Italian, if you're gonna talk Italian, if you're gonna make money,
Mhm.
in Italy,
Mhm.
then you should know it's like perfectly.
Right. You should know the culture because what she was really teaching him were like the mannerisms, like "excelente," where when the Italians kiss their fingers and put their hands in the air and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
yeah, at that point in the film, Italia didn't know that Beniamina was dead. I really just think they wanted to be able to communicate around Flora without them knowing. And yeah, there also is a part of that nationalism too, in relation also to Italia's name in and of itself. Like she's supposed to represent Italy and the pureness and sincerity of it and the, good naturedness of Italy, sort of to counterbalance, the negative Italians who are robbing graves and the foreigner who's coming here and sucking up the culture and doing horrible things to their ancestors. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, Italia didn't know what he was doing.
Yeah.
He didn't know the reality of it, but I just thought it was sort of like that vibe.
Yeah.
That's the vibe that I got from Italia teaching him
Yeah.
Italian.
Exactly. But back to Italia, right? Like she's living in like this other house and she has a daughter and she also has her half black son, right? And stuff like that. And I'm just going to take it there. I do think there is some symbolism in the half black son. I think that's supposed to represent some like pseudo futurism for Italy. You get what I'm saying? Not saying that all of Italy is going to be biracial and stuff like that, but if we think about this film is talking about digging up the past and dealing with the past. Well, what about the future of the country as well? And I feel like Italia, by her very name, right? She has one white child and then she also has a black child. And Italy is one of the main ports where all these Africans are like entering the coast to Italy. I just think there is some symbolism there that the director was trying to put in there. Any comments?
Yes, I think it could represent the future, like you said, and it could also represent the past as well. Because, like you said, Rome was a big empire, right? The Roman Empire.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, they did also have colonialism in their history as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not wrong. So it could be a hint to the past as well, like
Mm-hmm.
saying this was in our history as well.
Mm-hmm.
We have seen black people, we have been with black people before because it was in our history. Maybe not in the best way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we were an empire and we, used people in a bad way.
Mm-hmm.
But that was in our history. So I think it could be taken to both directions, future and the past.
Got you. Got you. I think that's very interesting because this baby is sort of like throughout the film and nobody really talks about it other than, Italia saying, to her daughter, "Hey, take your brother, take care of him and hide him." It was just kind of funny to me. They kept on the one black character in this very white film. And I'm like, why are they hiding this black baby? We want to
I
know.
mean, here's your message there a little bit. We talked about Italia's nationalism, right? Her name is
Hmm.
Italia. She wants to teach Arthur proper Italian and all things like that. So even though she's a nationalistic person, she's also okay with creating life with someone presumably not Italian,
You're right.
right? So maybe it's saying that, yeah, like a person like Italia or the thought that Italia carries can
Hmm.
be true. Like you can be nationalistic and proud of your country and your culture.
Hmm.
That doesn't mean you have to be like a colonialist or,
Hmm.
I don't know, racist or whatever.
Right, right. Very good points. Very good points. And the reason I brought that all up is because, we really see how Italia lives at home when she's not with, Flora. And that's also the scene where Arthur sort of shows affection to her really by giving her this bell this bronze bell that he gifts her with. Then later on, the gang goes up to this fancy office, and they're dropping off the goods that they found the first time when they went in the grave to Spartaco. And it's at a veterinarian's office. They walk in there and they drop the material into like some tube while the veterinarian is on the phone with Spartaco. They don't see Spartaco, and they keep on calling Spartaco him, like him, the guy. You know what I mean? And then, the veterinarian talks as the liaison between Spartaco and the gang, and Spartaco, and he says that Spartaco says, like, your goods are okay. Arthur, it's glad to have you back, but these are the goods of a poor person, and we're looking for the goods of a rich person. And the tube comes back with like a stack full of money, but like a weak stack. Like, it's not like a thick old stack of a brick of money. And one of the gang guys says, we'll take it. And they take the money and then leave. What did you think about that whole interaction and scene?
That scene was giving me Austin Powers vibes. Like the whole machinery that they were using.
Yeah.
It was like, that part took me out of it a little bit. Like, it was fun and it was sort of comedic, right? But in a way that wasn't realistic anymore, if that makes sense. Like, I'm like Austin Powers, like how Austin Powers is not realistic at all. It was giving me that vibes, and yeah, I felt like that money that they received wasn't enough of, like, for the danger that they put themselves in. Because every time they went into the tombs, I was thinking, what if the whole thing comes down on them? And they're just, like, dead. Because these tombs are thousands of years old, right?
Yeah.
So every time they go there, they're risking their lives, or, they could go to jail as well. Right? Every time they're doing that. So yeah, it maybe felt like, I don't know, 700 euros or something.
I felt like that scene was actually really good. Like, I disagree with you. Like, does it give Austin Powers vibes? A little bit, but I think that's because of the fashion. Like, let's take a step back. Everybody in this film really does look like they were dropped out of the 70s. Like, cause everybody's super skinny, hairy chest, big hair, curly hair, mustaches, beards, all sorts of stuff, tight jeans, bell bottoms. You get what I'm saying? Like, super tight shirts. Like, nobody weighs more than 60 kilos, even a grown ass man. Like, it's,
Yeah, but there was like this blonde, futuristic looking guy there that worked in the office, and he had like this, I don't know what that cut of hair is called,
just a
but like,
big, like, I don't know, like one of the
a
Brady
long
Bunch.
bob.
Yeah, bowl something.
And he had like platinum hair,
Yeah.
and he looked like he was gonna say, "Oh my god, like I'm so glad you guys are here." Like, he was given like gay vibes and stuff like that. It was just like, I don't know.
No, I felt that scene because it really gave me like, okay, this is really the underworld, because that's how the underworld is. Like, if you're selling coke to like veterinarians and doctors and stuff like that. And if you're on higher levels of the underworld where all sorts of illicit things are traded, there's like, you're not going to see the guy. You're not going to even know who the guy is. You're just going to know him by a nickname or whoever. So it felt real. Like, if they went to meet Spartaco and sat down at his desk and he was just there chomping on a cigar, I would have been like, okay, that's just hella fake. But that felt more mysterious and real for me. So I like that scene.
Okay, and what about the fact that poor people's shit ain't worth anything, even if it's thousands of years old?
I was just about to bring that up. There is that classism between different peoples. Even, yeah, like classism persists across centuries, right? Because if I die and I leave my iPhone, it's not as valuable as if Elon Musk dies and leaves his iPhone. You know what I mean? So there's classism with the material. What did you think?
Yeah, that was just sad, because for me, I would think it doesn't really matter. Like, if I'm looking at, I don't know, Cleopatra's cup, or just some random farmer's cup, yeah, Cleopatra's cup may be made out of gold and might look prettier, but they're like the same age as the farmers. And maybe farmers is made of clay or something like that. But when you look at it, they're, not material, but emotional values should be the same.
I I kind of disagree because I feel like we've been talking about what they're finding in the wrong way. Like they're not just finding things like cups and vases. Like they're looking for art to some degree. And later on in the film, when they discover the big statue of the whatever, right? Like the woman with the lion and the fish in her hand, like that's a beautiful piece of art, no matter what century, generation you live in. But just finding a vase or a cup is going to have lower value. And the thing is, of course they're going to say, oh, these cups and vases aren't important because they were probably owned by millions of people back in the day. But only a few people had these giant marble statues. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but that's still classism and it sucks. Because if you look at art today, there are a lot of pieces that represent classism, capitalism, racism, sexism, all those things. Today's art kind of goes into the other direction, right? Especially modern art, if you think about it. It has more value if it has something to say against the system. Well, that's how I feel like it
Right.
is. And back then it was like, it has more value if it belongs to the richest person.
I think, regardless of whether, the art nowadays is different than the art in the past or how we judge it, the fact is, like, valuable art, meaningful art is still held mostly in the hands of a few people, right? Like we have our house, and in our house, the only piece of art we have is on our refrigerator that your friend made. Now, if this art survives centuries, maybe it will be worth something. Who knows what could even happen tomorrow? But I think, when we dig up the homes of old people back in the day, 99% of people wouldn't have any real art in there. But a few of them would have very valuable art because they were the rich people then. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And the same would apply today. Like, if we all died today and aliens came later to dig us up, only a few people would have valuable art in their crib.
Okay. Okay, I get what you're saying.
Yeah. But anyway, picking up from there, Italia sort of like joins the gang after they get the money from Spartacus. And so they're like partying and stuff on a beach somewhere in Italy. There's also some other guys who are like hawking out the scene, and like they look like thugs or gangsters, like following the Torabelli. What was the name of the group? The gang?
Tom Borelli.
Tom Borelli, right? So Arthur and the Tom Borelli, which sounds like a cool band.
Tom Borelli. Sorry.
Tombaroli.
Yeah.
Okay, Arthur and the Tombaroli, which sounds like a really cool dish. They're having a party at the beach, and Italia's like dancing all weird, and Arthur's like smirking at her, like, thinking she's kind of cute. The other guys sort of like pile on her, and so then Arthur and Italia sort of like run away, but then the Tombarelli chase him down in the truck, and then they go to this beach next to a power plant, and while they're there, Arthur gets like a vision, and he sort of like passes out on the beach. And the guys are like, okay, I guess this is where we're going to start digging. Who knew today will be the day we're going to find something really big? And Italia is sort of like freaked out when she discovers that the group, how they make their money, right? Like she discovers now, oh, the guy I'm really attracted to, he's a grave digging, grave robber, stuff like that. And so she tries to blackmail Arthur by saying, what would Benjamina think? And then that's also when Italia finds out Benjamina's dead. Italia runs away and says, I'm going to call the police. And, the guys curse her out and say, go, get out of here. And they dig a hole and they find the most beautiful sculpture that they've ever seen. This woman made of marble standing next to a panther holding a giant fish. And it's amazing. And Arthur is sort of stuck in awe. And then one of the guys sort of like chops the head off of the statue as it rolls on the floor. And at the same time, we hear police sirens outside. So the guys are like, oh no, what are we going to do? Arthur is also freaking out at the guys as well because he's mad that they sort of attacked this beautiful statue in front of him. And so they all run away. And then we see that the police were actually the gang at the party that was scoping out the Tombarelli. And they sort of steal the statue that the guy is found. What did you think about that whole scene?
Once again, I really like Italia's character. I think she's sweet, and we see that throughout the movie, and she's also like silly as well. I like that she's not, stuck up or it's not surface level.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really rooting for Italia and Arthur. And I wanted them to like kiss or something because it finally felt like Arthur was not stuck up on his ex,
Mm-hmm.
who possibly died or I don't know, was lost. So yeah, it was nice to see like Arthur sort of being in love again. Yeah, and then when it comes to like Italia sort of freaking out, I think there was also a hint to the contrast of like religion and non-religion because I feel like the whole gang didn't have a religion. I don't think they believed in Jesus or God. Because I don't know, they were digging graves, and I would assume in Christian culture that that's a sin. And I can see that also from Italia's reaction where when she finds out what they're doing, she's like going to her chest and doing something, saying a prayer, whatever. So yeah, I think that's where maybe I was thinking, okay, Italia and Arthur are actually like really different people, and they might never work out. But I wasn't expecting her to be so like rebellious and saying like she's gonna call the police, they should stop, and she was trying to stop them, and she was sort of dominant or trying to be dominant, but she got put down by like other guys and the girl that was there as well. So I liked that about her as well, and I was not expecting that. And also when the police showed up, I thought Arthur was gonna like stay in the tomb, or he was gonna like, I didn't know what he was doing because it felt like he went to prison once, right? So I was thinking, okay, maybe he might go again, or he might like find a secret passage and hide out there. But then he got out, and yeah, it was like, I was also curious why the police weren't chasing them.
Yeah.
It was like a, a good surprising, not, I wouldn't say a plot twist, but, I guess like a good surprise.
Yeah, I disagree with you about Italia. F that snitch. Any snitch like that. Come on now, that's horrible. Like, okay, yeah, they're robbing graves. Okay, you might not like it. Don't call the police. Come on now. Come on now. I really disliked Italia after that. I also thought it was interesting how, she threw away the bell that Arthur gave her because it gained new meaning now. When she discovered that that bell probably came from the grave of somebody from 2,000 years ago, she's like, the value of this doesn't matter to me because the meaning of it is more significant, right? You stole this from somebody. I don't want it. And think about that. Like, Italia could have sold that bell for thousands of dollars or whatever, but that's not what's important to her. The important thing is like doing what's right. So I can understand why you respect it, but it's still so cold hearted to call the police. Like, you don't know what could happen to those guys. And yeah, it was kind of annoying that the head chop on the statue was so anticlimactic. It wasn't dramatic at all. I felt like when they cut the head off of that statue, it should have felt more impactful, right? But it sort of just happened. And I wish there was more emphasis on that scene and how that affected Arthur, because it felt like it really did. And yeah, really cool scene though. This is one of the focal points of the movie, and it generally is entertaining. And it's so you get sort of like a how can I say this? Like a weird, not relief, but you're sort of like, oh, like this thing goes deep when we see the scene of the other robbers like pulling the statue out of the ground and then shipping it on the container. And then we see a woman, and my first thought is, wait, is that Spartico? Because she's standing there like the boss. And like they, put the statue in like a shipping container and cover it with soccer balls and pay off the guys a bigger lump sum of money and stuff like that. I was like, okay, the rabbit hole goes deep. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, when it comes to the chopping of the head, of the statue, I wasn't expecting it, But I do agree with you on that maybe it could have been maybe like a louder sound, when they chopped it, so it would have a more effect. There could have been silence or something.
Yeah.
But that was definitely very effective scene still.
Yeah.
Like seeing that very beautiful whole statue getting chopped in the head, just like that.
Yeah.
Um,
And another thing, I think this film does take a stance. Like, this film isn't ambiguous saying, okay, grave robbing might be okay. Like, this film obviously takes a stance that it's wrong to do this, because before they open up that tomb, right, they show inside the tomb, and they show the pictures of the animals on the wall, and the pottery and the scenery and stuff like that. And then they show when the tomb opens that the paintings instantly get hit with oxygen, and then they fade away to become less bright, less colorful, less vibrant. And so that sacredness, that spirit of the tomb is gone. You get what I'm saying? So I feel like the film with that scene, and when I watched that, I think you heard me say, because that scene really moves me, because it's like, yeah, the energy of that place is now broken. The virginity of it is broken. Go ahead.
yeah. Which also raises another question. Like, are we right to be digging the tombs? It's one thing for, maybe, I don't know, it's one thing just trying to dig hills, but it's another thing to be digging tombs. And also Italia says, like, that is not for human eyes, it's for the soul. And, who are we to be disrespectful to those people who lived thousands of years ago and then go and steal their things and harm their things and take their things? Maybe it is it supposed to be hidden? Like, are we supposed to really discover everything? And it does talk about, like, I think also later in the movie, there is some hint to, like, humans' greediness of discovery.
Yeah, I think, once again, the film doesn't ask that question. Well, it asks the question and it answers it. Is it right to dig up the tombs? I would say this film says no, no, no. Don't do it. Especially at the ending when, like, Arthur, like, dies technically in his own tomb. So I feel like the film is saying, like, no, this is not okay. But it uses this question to then lead us to that conclusion, right? So yeah, basically the statue gets sold by the other group of bandits, and everybody's sort of like really depressed and pissed about what to do. The gang, gets together, and they're going to confront Spartaco, but Spartaco is not at the office. So then they take a boat somehow, because Melody tells them where Spartaco is. And they take a boat to this yacht in the middle of this lake, looking like it's in the Italian Alps. And Arthur tries to confront Spartaco, who is doing an auction. And she's showing the picture of the statue without its head, saying it's valueless, like the number of the price cannot be quantified, because this is one of the finest pieces of art and most detailed pieces of art. People will pay millions to see it, and what we're here to do is trying to find out the value. And Arthur and his gang burst into the building. They're ushered away by her assistant, but eventually Spartaco and Arthur have a one-on-one. And Spartaco basically says, look at those guys out there that you're with. You try to act like them, but they're worthless. They're nothing compared to people like us. Like, you will always be what you are, and I'll always be what I am. And, Spartaco tries to confront the gang outside, but the gang tells her, we have the head. And this head is, you said that the statue is invaluable. Then what is the head worth to you? And so there's this funny scene where Spartaco is like barking at the gang like a dog, and the gang is barking back at her, and Arthur is just looking at them. But then Spartaco says, show me the head. And Arthur gets the head, opens it, and says, Italia was right. Like, you're not worth human eyes, or human eyes shouldn't look at you. And he like tosses it in the ocean, and everybody says, no! So what did you think about the reveal that Spartaco was a woman what she said to Arthur, and also Arthur like tossing the head in the ocean?
I think the fact that Spartaco was a woman might be a hint to the history of that ancient civilization. I forgot their name.
Etruscans.
Etruscans, right? Because they were a female-led society, and yeah, this scam or this capitalist sort of
Industry.
auctioning,
Industry.
what?
Industry.
Industry, yes. This whole like industry is also led by a woman. So maybe it is a hint to that. I'm not sure. But that was definitely like an interesting twist because yeah, like why not? And I liked it as a feminist. And yeah, and I think that whole scene was pretty like, directly was hinting at the class difference between those two, and also how actually like these tomb diggers and grave diggers are just like a pawn to the whole system, and maybe we shouldn't punish them only, but also punish the rich who are contributing to the system and sort of making the system possible, which is kind of like in any industry under capitalism.
Right. Right. Yeah. I think. Well, one last question. What did you think about the tossing of the head?
I think that's when, for me, when Arthur realized that he shouldn't be disrespecting art like this, historical art. And he sort of understood the beauty and the value of it because he was so enchanted by this head and what he saw in under the tomb as well. Right? So I think that's when he realized that he shouldn't be doing this. And he's doing something that's unnatural, unjust, something like that. And he was affected by what Italia told him as well. It's not for human eyes. So he wanted to get rid of it and get it away from everyone. But obviously we know that the, Spartaco is going to dig it out and sell it anyway. So it was kind of stupid.
I don't think it was stupid because who knows? She might not be able to find the head at the bottom of the ocean. Sure, she might have enough money to do it, but it might be very hard and expensive or damn near impossible. I I didn't think about what you said, that Spartaco might represent sort of like the Etruscan come back to life, or is some degree like, because people, Melody and them, they think, the Etruscans were a better society. And once again, the film shows that we look to the past, but our present is more dynamic, and we can make our present what we think our past was. And we don't need ancient artifacts to do that. I thought, once again, looking at this film through the lens of critiquing white supremacy, it wasn't a shock to me that they chose to make Spartaco a blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman, and also the veterinarian, the guy with the platinum hair that you spoke about earlier, her main assistant, and they're standing up in front of the auction about to get all this money from all of these rich people who are paying whatever for these stolen illicit goods. I think that was very symbolic of white supremacy. I'm pretty sure the director or writer wasn't thinking that, but it comes across that way. Arthur confronting Spartaco, there was sort of that, meeting of the class. Because think about this, Arthur is like a very tall British man. He probably comes from like a very aristocratic background, because most people that study archaeology, like that's a luxury humanity that you study, like that's not something most people who come from working class backgrounds say, I'm going to study archaeology to make $1 million. Like, that's a very posh bourgeoisie career choice. And so, Arthur facing Spartaco, it was like a sort of come back to home moment, for him. And the realization that there is a class difference between him and his gang that he tries to run with. Sort of like that Arthur is like faking it to some degree. Like he's a poser amongst these Italians. Like he tries to act Italian, act tough and speak it, but really, you're a British aristocratic, daddy's boy, whatever, with a trust fund back in London. And that takes me to the head tossing scene. Now, I know it's important for Arthur's character development to toss the head right into the ocean and say, you're not meant for human eyes. But the guys that you work with, you see how poor they are. You see how they live. They're struggling day to day. And you just threw away their meal ticket for probably, a better life for them or their children or whatever. I felt like it was hella selfish. And, it might make Arthur look good in our minds, like, oh, he's reached realization. But it made him seem like he didn't care about his friends who were there for him.
Yeah, I get it, but at the same time, like, can we justify any act that provides living for people?
If we think about it, robbing the graves of ancient people is a victimless crime in the sense like, it's not violent. You're not hurting anybody physically. What you're doing is morally wrong, right? It's like gambling, right? Or, taking drugs, right? You're not hurting anybody other than yourself, maybe, right? But it's not the worst thing you could do. Go ahead.
Yeah, but I think like unconsciously or unintentionally, they are helping the system that puts them where they are.
Mm-hmm.
They are making rich people richer, and that just only ends up making them poorer.
Right. I think it's worse than just making rich people richer, because you could say this about almost anything that we do. I think it's the fact that they're stealing artifacts that we as a society say should be available to everybody and should be seen by everybody. But these rich people have the advantage of getting the artifacts and just putting them in their bathroom or their living room, right? Instead of having them be in museums that are flexible enough to be available to the public. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't know. Yeah, the head toss scene. I kind of saw it coming too. Did you see it coming?
I felt it when he started walking away from everyone.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, there's definitely like that sort of tension
Mm-hmm.
with him in that scene.
Yeah. I thought the gang was gonna kill him.
I know, and it was annoying. That's why I thought the rich lady, Spartico, is gonna dig it up, because she
Mm-hmm.
was smirking. There was
Yeah,
like a smirk in her face, and I felt like she was thinking, oh, now, like, it doesn't belong to you. I know you can't get it, but
yeah.
I can get it because I have the resources.
Right, right, right. But moving on from there, basically, Arthur is on the train with his gang back from wherever they left Spartaco. And, one of the guys is like ice grilling Arthur, like he's gonna kill him. But Arthur is like, you ain't gonna do nothing, pussy. And he steps off the train to try to get a cigarette. And then that's when he sees the ghosts that say, hey, have you seen this, artifact that my father left me? And then a few girls come to him, hey, have you seen this thing that my brother left in his grave? Blah, blah, blah. And then he runs off of the train. What did you think of that scene? Because I thought that was a very powerful scene.
Yeah, at first I didn't understand like that it was a dream, or
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, like
A
maybe he was
hallucination.
hallucinating. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't understand when the first guy asked him, but then I understood when the girls started asking him and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think what I thought was that, yeah, he was feeling guilty about stealing, historical artifacts, but then he was also feeling guilty about what he did to his friends. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why, modern people, like, there was sort of that clash with, or combination of modern people talking about old artifacts. I
Mm-hmm.
felt like it was two guilts coming together a little bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I felt like the film was making it very clear its stance on robbing these things, because Arthur is getting haunted by all of the artifacts he's taken from all of these different people that he'll never know, but they speak to him in the voices or in the faces of people that he has seen before. The girls he met at the train at the beginning of the film, the train conductor and stuff like that. So yeah, it was, it all sort of tied up. There is one big mystery though, because Arthur shows that train conductor, or the ticket checker, whatever, a ticket that's very strange. And I wonder if that ticket was like from Spartaco. Was he sent by the British government on a mission to to steal artifacts in Italy? Is he an agent of chaos by the British government? Like, is that what he showed the ticket man? Do you have any theories?
Maybe it was to represent that he was a foreigner.
Mm,
Or no matter how he tries to disguise that, he's British or he's a foreigner,
yeah,
in the end, we know that he's not Italian.
yeah. Yeah. So anyway, I really like that scene. It's very powerful. Arthur runs off of the train. He's wandering around Italy for days and years. He grows a beard. He goes back to his little shack, and we see that the police are tearing down his shack now and tearing up all of his stuff. And he's like, "No, wait, stop!" And they're like, "Shut up." And so he's wandering around town, and he sees his old gang, but they sort of like ignore him. And then he sees Italia's daughter. And Italia's daughter is like, "You gotta clean up if you want to see Italia." So he like shaves and puts on a pink shirt. And then he goes to where Italia's living now. And she lives in the railroad track station that they remodeled. And she lives there with her kids and a few other women and stuff like that. And, yeah, they basically remodeled the place as well. And so Arthur comes in and her and Natalia kiss. Presumably they have sex. And the next day, Arthur just gets up and leaves the house. What did you think about any of those scenes?
Yeah, I think it was I was feeling sad for Arthur because when he was, maybe in the beginning he was mad at his friends, but it was obvious that they had a friendship. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't just about business, but when his friends left him like that and hated him because of what he did, it did feel like, oh, was it just for money and that they were using him, basically. And then once Arthur is sort of like leaving where they are, the other team, the team of Spartaco, comes up to him and says, "Hey man, like, you look bad. Let's get you some food and new clothes, and maybe you can do digging for us."
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, like, once again, I felt sad for him because he was being used and hunted for his talent,
Mm-hmm.
where in reality he felt guilty because of his talent,
Mm-hmm.
because it made him able to do what he was able to do and commit a crime, lots of crimes.
Mm-hmm.
And I really liked the whole thing that Italia created. And once again, I think it might be representative of Italy as a culture or as a country, of like just one big happy community.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what we sort of saw. And all the women were talking about what Arthur could do, because Italia said, I was thinking Arthur could stay with us, right? And I thought it was like so cute. Everyone said like, "Oh, he could be our maid. He could like cook meatloaf and he could clean the toilet." And like little girl is saying like, "Oh yeah, we really need someone to clean the toilet." And that was so cute. And I think once again that was hinting at the old civilization,
Mm-hmm.
right? Run by women.
Mm-hmm.
And Italia sort of recreated, like you said, old into the new. And there is still that sense of, women are ruling in this house at the very least.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I got the feeling like, once again, it was like trying to recreate that feeling of what the Etruscan civilization was like. And it goes back to the point I made earlier. Like, we look to the past, but we can make our lives now like how we want. And that's sort of what Italia was doing. I didn't like how they were like covering the black girl's hair or her son's hair or something like that. Cause like the black baby now is a bit more grown, but he is like, hiding his hair. Once again, I didn't like how they kept on hiding this black baby. Even when he's on screen, they're trying to hide parts of him. Stop it. Stop it. I don't know what that was about. It was kind of bothering me. And I'm the first black person to review this film on YouTube, so I gotta say it. I gotta say it. And but I like the community part. Go ahead.
I didn't see that part that they covered the black baby's hair.
I felt like, oh wait, no, I'm sorry, I'm wrong. I'm looking at the video again. Yeah, he's still a baby. But I feel like there's another black person there, but they're trying to cover their hair.
You mean they're treating them for lice? Are you
Yeah, but
talking
black
about
people
that?
don't get lice.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know that, but yeah, they might be like a Romani person. I don't know.
It's a bit strange. It's a bit strange because maybe like how when black people grow up with white people and white people like put sunscreen on them when they go to the beach, like it might be that situation. Like, hey everybody, we're gonna clean our hair for lice today, and and the little black girl has to come along too.
Okay. Well, I did not know that, but yeah, that might possibly be the situation.
Okay. But yeah, it's impossible for us to get lice because 4C hair is too curly for the lice to live in. But I was kind of annoyed that Arthur didn't have something to live for. Like he chose to go back to the lifestyle of being a criminal, and yeah, sort of let Italia go. Like I would have been fine with this film sort of having that happy ending where he lives in the community with Italia. But I feel like the film didn't want us to leave it there. Like they wanted to continue to challenge us. And so yeah, basically, like AKDI said, um, Arthur hooks back up in the criminal lifestyle by going with the new gang, and they take him to this spot where they're digging for gold, but he can't find anything. But then one of the guys there says, "Oh, I found gold right over here," and Arthur's like, "Yep, that's the spot." They dig the hole, and then they tell Arthur to get in. Like he's the first one to get in because he found it. He doesn't want to do it at first, but they insist. And so when he climbs in the hole, oh, oh, look at that. Ironically, the hole collapses behind him and he's trapped in the tunnel. It's very claustrophobic. He starts having a little panic attack. He continues going forward in the tunnel until he finds a red string and he pulls the red thread and he realizes it's the same red thread that we've been seeing throughout the film. It's this reoccurring dream of Benjamina, pulling a thread from a hole in the ground. And as she keeps on pulling it, it doesn't come out, right? And eventually, because he now sees the thread, he pulls it and sort of releases it, breaks the thread between her and Benjamina, him being underground and her above ground. And then the film ends with them hugging and stuff like that. What did you think about the end?
Yeah, I also wanted Arthur to stay with Italia because I was thinking like, oh, we're gonna see Arthur, wearing a cook's apron and just cooking them pancakes, or cleaning the toilet with like the cleaner lady outfits. Like
Yeah.
that's the type of happy ending I was hoping for. And I was also disappointed when he went back to work for those other guys.
Yeah.
And yeah, but I think the ending was very symbolic because yeah, you might assume he died, but he might have not died either because we never actually see him dying, right? We just see him sort of like pull the thread and there is light that hits his face. So I don't know, maybe it represents him making peace with the past and sort of accepting it and moving it on. And I hope it's that because then he could go back to where Italia is, right? And maybe live with them. And it sort of feels like maybe like a closure or acceptance towards his own history and past. And that's what I would like to think.
I mean, that's wishful thinking. Once again, I wanted that to be the ending too, but the film said, nope, gotta break a heart. And I feel like it's obvious he died because Spartaco was gonna put that hit on him. That's when this film sort of turns into a mafia film because first and foremost, they showed up on Spartaco's boat unannounced. They saw her face, the big no-no in mafia. if you're dealing at that level of criminal organizations. So yeah, Spartaco is like, I gotta kill Arthur. And probably Spartaco probably tried to kill the rest of the guys too, because they know too much now. And, yeah, he disrespected Spartaco by throwing the head into the sea. So, you know, when the tunnel closed on Arthur, I was like, oh, that makes sense. Yeah, they did that on purpose. And, as far as the thread goes, I think it's, you know, more symbolism than it is realism. That wasn't real light. Maybe he's imagining it, or maybe that's just the film turning into magical realism at that point. But him pulling the thread and breaking it, I think that is him making peace with Benyamina, because he was always tied to her. In the dream, she kept pulling on the thread, but he finally broke it, and now he has to realize he has to lay in the grave that he dug for himself, right? Like, he made all of these bad choices, and he now has to accept that he will die here, because that's what he chose. So that's how I interpret it.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely an interpretation that could be true. And I want to say two things. First of all, about Benyamina, I've always had this idea throughout the movie that Arthur can be responsible for her death. And I'm not saying like he murdered her or anything like that. That's not the case. But because he was involved in so many dangerous things, like going into the tombs or effing around with the police and things like that, maybe Benyamina might have gotten into trouble in one of those instances before he went to prison, and he might be having that guilt about it.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just the feeling I got from it. Because he was so obsessed with like her. And at the same time, in the ending part, they show birds. Constantly, like, they're in a construction site, but there are birds that are there. And it definitely reminded me of the second song / story that was sung in the movie. And there was a line there where the singer said, what if humans were like birds? They weren't greedy. They weren't chasing, more and more. And they were just enjoying the world, something like that.
Right.
And it just reminded me of that. It was interesting that they put birds there. And I think that's what Arthur thought about. Like, should I be like the birds? Like animals, like nature, that's not greedy and sort of let things happen on its own? Or should I go after my greed? And he chose to go after his greed.
I feel like it's not I feel like it's not greed though. Like, Arthur said, this is what I was born to do. I have a gift. I gotta use it. Like, I have no choice but to do it.
He literally like throw the head into the ocean to not be involved in this. And then like he goes again and does it again. 'Cause I think he thought he didn't have any value other than what he was capable of doing.
I mean, it's an addiction, you know? It's like you say, I'm gonna stop smoking today. So you throw your whole pack away. Then you back chugging a whole nother one, you puffing a whole nother pack tomorrow.
Yeah, that is also a part of greed as well. Because Italia accepted him the way he was, even though, in spite of his mistakes, she didn't really expect anything from him to do, anything related to his witchy powers. But he refused to live along through that and then decided to go after his bad faith.
I see. I feel like, it's relatable for what Arthur chose to do, because you and I have both made choices where we say, we're going to stop this, we're going to not do this anymore, and then the next thing you know, we're doing it again. Hence these movie reviews.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's part of being human. And that's why I think the song or that message of birds were there. Like, maybe, even though we do very effed up stuff continuously, we're humans and we can't really help it.
Right.
And we're not birds, but, we wish we were birds.
There's a scene earlier in the film where a bunch of birds are on the backs of sheep. And like the birds are like picking at the sheep and probably eating stuff they find in their wool and stuff like that. And I think that's a metaphor for this film too. Like, on one hand, yeah, we want to be free like the birds, but the birds also gotta eat. and the birds have a symbiotic relationship with other living things, right? So, just like how the grave robbers have a relationship to the past and digging up the past, like the birds have the same thing. They need the sheep to eat. You get what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, I guess. But it does happen like more with the flow with them
Mm-hmm.
rather than us humans. We sort of force into things.
Yeah. Yeah. But overall, I think this is a good film. It's great for discussing, right? Like, this is a good discussion starter, no?
Definitely. I feel like the more you talk about it, you can go in deeper.
Yeah.
Like when you talk about system, how sort of art or historical art is distributed within the world.
Mm-hmm.
Who owns it, who takes care of it, who should take care of it,
Mm-hmm.
and all that like industry, plus this idea of the past as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't talk about this film without thinking about Arthur being like the British imperialists taking like the Elgin columns from Greece and like diamonds from South Africa. So yeah, to the British Museum of Natural History, please return all your shit. Thank you. And, yeah, I'll never forget how I felt about the first part of this film though. So the first part really does drag on. It's kind of confusing. If you're not into that sort of narrative way of telling a story, you're not going to feel this film. So that lowers the score for me, but the second half is honestly fire if you stick with it. But it is the slow burn. There are some scenes that could have gotten cut. Like there's scenes I didn't talk about, like, for example, Arthur tells Flora that Benjamina is dead, right? Like there's no emotion there. Like the whole movie could have been without that. And there's also other few scenes too that felt unnecessary. So yeah, there's some extra parts here that sort of take away from the narrative and also a slower pace that could kind of bore you. So I give this film like a solid 6.5, honestly. It's good, not great, but you'll like it if you're really into artistic films and different storytelling methods, right?
Yeah, yeah, I'll give this movie a 7.
Mm-hmm.
Because I really did enjoy certain things. I like the themes of it. I like the music. I like the acting in general. I like certain symbolisms. But there are things, like you said, I didn't mind the beginning, honestly. But there are things that sometimes took me out of the realism of the film,
Mm-hmm.
but not the same things that took you out
Mm-hmm.
from the movie. But I think there could be those elements in this movie that sort of affects people differently.
Yeah.
But I like how they were, telling this like a folk tale, like
Mm-hmm.
a talk of the town tale,
Mm-hmm.
that sort of thing. I like that vibe.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is kind of like a slow burn. I guess it does pick up towards the end, yeah, like every other movie. But up till there, I would say this is a slow burn. And if you're not into that sort of depressing comedy,
Mm-hmm.
you might not like it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Let's make it absolutely clear. This is not a comedy per se. There are funnier Italian movies. I felt like I laughed more in Molina than I did in this. And yeah, it's basically a film about a ghetto archaeologist and his clique of grave robbers. You feel me? This is Indiana Jones meets Boys in the Hood. It's a unique film. It's a different film, but it's not the greatest film. But it's cool. It's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I think if you're a movie geek, you will watch it and have stuff to discuss about it.
Yeah.
But if you're just someone who sort of watches, the top movies or just Netflix, then
Mm-hmm.
this might not be for you.
Yeah, definitely. But all right, this has been episode 65 of Simon and AKDI movie reviews for La Chimera. And send more movie requests. This was a movie request from our guy High Seaman on X. Funny name. But anybody who's got anything you suggest we watch, let us know in the comments. Tune in for more content and peace.